good coffee. Today's build show coming to you from my house under construction. That's right, the Real Rebuild mechanical systems are in, and I got a really fun tour to show you today. We're gonna be showing off my house, and we're gonna be talking specifically about to-zone or not to-zone. Now, I ended up on this house with 3 separate zones, plus a party unit, plus I've got a garage HVAC system, so I've got a little heating and cooling from my workshop space. Really fun episode, and I have my old friend, Kimberly Llewellyn, a really smart engineer who's the rep for Mitsubishi for the high-end builders like me who do high-performance stuff. Today's build show is sponsored by Mitsubishi Electric Train US. Let's get going. All right, guys, let me introduce you to my old friend, Kimberly Llewellyn. Kimberly and I have worked together for probably 10 years now. And Kimberly used to work with Positive Energy, who did all these load calcs for me and did this full design. Now, not everybody's gonna do this level of design and this level of detail, but at a minimum, what should builders or homeowners that are thinking about designing a good system do?
So Matt, at a minimum, everybody needs to get a good quality load calculation done. That's where every good system starts.
Gotcha, so load calc meaning manual J for my nerdy friends out there. And this is the page that Positive Energy shows that. This basis of design right here in the plans is all the input values. Things like, what's my window package? My Geldwin windows have an average U factor of 0.29 and a solar heat gain coefficient of 0.22. My floor insulation on the slab is a R whatever. All those numbers get inputted into the program. And then what does that spit out? What's this table right here, Kimberly?
So what you get out of your load calculation are the actual values of what your home requires in terms of heating and cooling. So what kind of system do you need? How big does it need to be? How small?
Okay, so then on this system, or on this calculation here, we're showing my house has 5 zones, or 5 systems, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's showing where those systems are and what those calcs are. So for instance, in my kitchen ceiling, I have kind of a cool unit. It's a recessed cassette ductless. Can you break this down and kind of tell us what that means?
Yeah, sure. So we've got, like you said, a ductless system. So there are no ducts running to it. You just have a set of refrigerant lines running to it, condensate, and then some control wires. But other than that, there are no air ducts because all of the conditioned air is coming right off the face of that grill, so right from that unit, which means that there are no losses associated with any of the ductwork, not in terms of heating or cooling or air leakage, which can happen.
Awesome.
Yes.
And it's pretty straightforward to install. The installer just basically puts that up into some all-thread, secures that in the ceiling, connects in my 2 Freon lines, and now my whole kitchen area is serviced both heating and cooling, right? This is a heat pump system. There's no gas at all on this system. Everything's coming from that. Now, it's important to remember this house is a very efficient house, Kimberly. I've got a lot of exterior insulation. I've got a really good window package. I have some standard double glazed Geldwin. I also have some triple glaze that are even more efficient. Plus, I've done a really good job of air sealing. And one of the inputs here is how tight air-wise is the house. How much leakage could we expect? And we've got a very tight value on this house. Now, that particular unit, though, Kimberly, how do we tell how to size that unit based on these numbers on the plans here?
Right. So what you look at is, well, which is what we call our dominant load. So which number is higher, basically? Okay. So that's our net gain. So that's our cooling load.
Gain meaning how much heat's coming into that room.
Exactly. How much heat gain do we have?
And these numbers are in BTUs, right? So that 4727?
BTUH, yep.
BTUs per hour.
Exactly.
So 4,000 BTUs per hour. And for those of you who don't know, Kimberly, give us the translation between tonnage and BTUs.
Okay, so it's about 12,000 BTUH per ton of cooling. That's how we're really commonly calling out cooling capacity in terms of tonnage. So
got it. So when builders nominally say, hey, we're putting a 3-ton system in, what they're saying is they're putting a 36,000 BTU per hour capable system in.
That's right.
And so that ceiling, though, in that kitchen or that kitchen area, that load's not very big. 4,000 BTUs of cooling is not much. And the heating load's even smaller. If my old eyes are correct, the loss is 2,800 square feet.
That's right. Right. So you only need a little bit of cooling and heating for that space. So being able to pull that out into its own zone really can increase performance in terms of comfort and also energy efficiency.
And what I like about that is that Mitsubishi equipment's pretty small. That's a 6,000 BTU one-way recessed ceiling cassette. So that little head on the wall is every bit as efficient as those mini split heads that we kind of think of when we may think of Mitsubishi. But all that technology is recessed into the ceiling. I've got one grill I can take down to service it or to replace it in 20 years. And the other thing I like about it is no ductwork means that my guy, Jeff, who installed it for me, he pulls it off the shelf at the dealer, he puts it in the ceiling and plugs a line in and he's done. So in theory, it should be a less costly system than him cutting all these joists and running ducts through it and doing all this other work. And putting a grill on and all that other stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt, because a lot of people assume it's a new piece of equipment or something that my installer might not be familiar with. Surely it's going to be a lot more expensive. But we have, as you pointed out, a lot of material and labor savings because you're not running ductwork.
I love it. Okay, so that's that zone. Let's go to the next zone. This is zone 2 right here, which is encompassing basically my whole upstairs on the house.
Right. So I'd like to just call out a point here.
Please do.
So you had mentioned just how low load your home is, and it really is, you know, we're looking at, how large is this house total?
About 2,800 square feet.
2,800 square feet. So we're well over 1,000 square feet per ton in terms of space cooling. So we consider that low load.
Yep.
So what happens with low load spaces is when you have ventilation systems bringing in continuous outdoor air, that ventilation load ends up being a bigger piece of the load pie. And so we see that showing up here, like in this system 2 here, where the net gain is 13,000 BTUH and the ventilation load is almost 5,000.
Wow.
So it's more than a third of the overall load just associated with that ventilation air, which is really important to include because your building envelope is going to be so tight.
And we want that, right? Because super tight houses means that I don't just have air infiltrating through my windows or coming through my insulation and bringing all that mold and pollen and junk with it. Instead, I've got a really tight envelope. I'm building a space shuttle or a submarine, and then I'm going to bring in air when I want it. I'm going to filter it and I'm going to send it to all my locations. But there's a penalty associated with that air, right? Meaning that there's a little bit of extra BTUs and probably a little bit of moisture as well.
Right, and there always is. It's just a matter, like you pointed out, are you controlling it or not? Is it your option or is it not your option?
That's right.
If it's coming through cracks and holes, then you have no choice.
That's right. Now, Kimberly, we haven't gotten into this yet, and I want to jump into this real quick. Your equipment, and one of the reasons why I switched to using pretty much almost all Mitsubishi equipment for the last 10 years is because you have the ability to ramp up and down the amount of conditioning, heating or cooling load that's coming from that outdoor unit. Can you explain what VRF means, that variable refrigerant flow technology you all have?
Absolutely. So VRF just stands for variable refrigerant flow. And what that means is that the amount of refrigerant, which is what is moving the heating or cooling through the whole system, the amount of refrigerant moving through the system can be variable. And that is controlled by the compressor. So the compressor is the big energy using piece of any HVAC equipment. And so if you have the option to just use as much energy as required to get just as much cooling or heating as you need out of that system, it's much more energy efficient. So in the case of this system that you've got, 48,000 BTUH or 4-ton outdoor unit, we can ramp down in cooling all the way down to a third of that overall tonnage.
That's amazing.
And in heating, it's even lower than that.
And traditional systems like I used 10 plus years ago, they would either have, let's say, single speed, or maybe you'd hear people talking about 2-speed systems, where a 4-ton unit would either run 0 tons or 4 tons. There's really nothing. It was like as if you got in your car and you floored the gas pedal to drive. And I've heard your old boss, Christoph Irwin, say it'd be like trying to throttle your car's engine just by starting and stopping with your key. And that's it. You had no option on the gas pedal but full gas. Your system allows us to kind of throttle that gas pedal depending on how much needs we have. The other example I like about that, Kimberly, is, you know, for instance, I just recently bought a camper. My pickup truck can't pull a camper very well. So here I might upgrade to a very large truck to pull my camper 3 weekends a year. seems a little silly. You know, most of the time I could probably get away with a little 4-cylinder engine, but when I need to pull that camper, occasionally it'd be nice to have that. And that's kind of what I like about your system. That 4-ton system that I have outside, 1% of the year it's 100 degrees outside. Most of the time it's 70, 75, 80 degrees out. It's not 100. So when I need 4 tons is by design on this Manual J, 1% of the hours of the year. When I need it, I've got it. But most of the time I can throttle that back and use less power, less amperage to drive that compressor. Did I say that correctly?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. We live in what we term partial load conditions, so not that full load condition. Most of in fact, here in Austin, about 40% of the hours out of the year or more. And so we need to have a system that can respond accordingly.
To dial back.
That's right. And see an even more poignant example of why we want to have variability is that even like 0.5% or 0.1% of the hours out of the year when you have a party.
Yeah.
And I love, this is my favorite part of your design.
Tell these guys about what I did for that.
Yeah, so system 4 here is a party load, and we really encourage people to do that. If you're big entertainers, even if you're big entertainers, it's still a few times a year that you're going to fill this room with 50 people,
That's right.
60 people. So you don't want to size your HVAC equipment to those event loads. You
So
do
what
want
I've done here then
yeah, tell me about it.
is I've got we'll get to this in a second. In fact, we're going to go upstairs and show you a medium static pressure ducted system, which looks like any old normal equipment in the house to the visitor because there's regular grills in the wall and there's air blowing out. But to supplement that, because it's a fairly small system, on the wall right here, there's a Freon line sticking out that'll eventually get what most people think of as a mini split head. And that one is sized as my party load. I think it's an 18,000 BTU unit. It'll be off most of the time, but if it's 105 out, or if my kids are running in and out and the doors are open all the time, or I have 50 people over for a party, all I gotta do is pop that unit on and I've got that supplemental cooling, or in the winter, supplemental heating.
Exactly.
Pretty cool. Kimberly, let's transition actually up to the attic and get a little nerdy with the specific equipment, because I said medium static pressure. No one knows what that is. Let's go show them. Kimberly, this is my favorite room in the house. Just to orient you guys, we're in the upstairs attic, the uppermost attic in my house, and underneath Kimberly and I's feet is my kids' bedrooms and upstairs family room. And I thought this would be a great place to show off, Kimberly, your equipment. Now this unit right here is doing all the heating and cooling for the upstairs of my house. And for those of you watching who have not seen this, I've used these for going on 10 years, but it's a little unusual. Most people are expecting to see a big gray box, maybe mounted horizontally. What is this, Kimberly? How do you explain this unit?
Yeah, so this is called our compact ducted system, and it's a mid-static unit. They also come in low static systems. So this is the right system for having some more extensive duct work. So it's a mid-static system that can go up to 0.6 inches of water column. And as you can see, we were oriented with our return here. So we've got air pulling in from this side, supplying out that side. And there's a lot going on here because you've got a real holistic HVAC solution here. So we've tied in supply air from that dehumidifier.
Yeah, so that's a little 70H Ultra Air dehumidifier.
Right.
Big fan of those. Anytime you're building in the south, I think you should have a separate dehumidifier. And why do we need a separate dehumidifier?
Yeah, so
Kimberly?
the reason, Matt, that's really important is that there are lots of hours out of the year when you don't actually need active cooling, but you've got continuous ventilation.
That's right.
So we're real humid in the spring and the fall in particular, and summer evenings. So whenever it's humid but not hot necessarily, you're going to need the help of that guy to dehumidifier.
Yeah, I love it. And this unit right here is almost mirrored, a slightly different size in the attic space above my master. It's a bit of a tight space, that's why we didn't film in there.
Yeah.
But this unit size is pretty much also supplying my master bedroom. There's 2 vents poking into my family room. I've got one into my foyer area. So it's kind of doing about half the first floor with that kitchen recessed ductless doing the other part of the first floor.
That's right. So that's a really great point, is that there are plenty of houses where we have a system just like this, where you might not have enough space to put a larger multi-position air handler.
Yep.
We've got a single system like this ducting the whole house.
Yep.
It can work if you've got a single level and you don't have a lot of differences in the loads.
Smart. Now I've also, with Mitsubishi Kimberly, installed your big gray box that has lots of power and might be what builders are used to seeing as a traditional 3 or 4 or 5 ton system, right?
Yeah, that's also an option. So we have those systems, and they can be upflow, they can go on their side, or they can also be downflow in most cases. So
Gotcha.
you've got all of those options available. One thing I wanted to point out about this system is that I mentioned it is mid-static, and sometimes people think, well, unless it's a high static system, I can't get good filtration off that system. But that's not true, actually. When you have a great duct design like this,
Let's actually pull
you
it
take
off and
that
show
off.
everybody. Yeah.
You can integrate a high efficacy or high efficiency air filter like this MERV 13 that you've got in here. So we've got the air coming in here from the return, going across that MERV 13 filter and into the system itself.
And actually this one, if I remember correctly, is double deep. So there's 2 of these guys.
That's right. You just have to reach
in there.
here
And about every 6 months or so, we're going to pop these out and clean them, and maybe once a year we're going to replace them.
Yep.
And those are pretty, even though those are maybe not available at the home center, that's pretty easily available size
To
at
order.
the HVAC supply house.
Sure.
Kimberly,
Absolutely.
now more than one of these units is tied to a single compressor outside, right? So
Right.
in my house, we mentioned earlier, I've got 5 zones, 5 different little small systems like this.
Yeah.
But I only have 3 compressors outside. Can you
Right.
walk me through that?
Yeah, so that means that we're using a multi-zone system on this. And multi-zone just means that, like you said, you're connecting more than one indoor unit to a single outdoor unit. So that can be the perfect solution if you're trying to meet the heating and cooling needs of a whole home with a single outdoor unit.
And what I like about that, Kimberly, is that gives me a little bit of redundancy. You guys have had, in my
Yes.
experience, very reliable equipment. But what happens if one of these units goes down or has a problem? It's really nice to have a second compressor outside so that I still have some heating and cooling in my house.
Absolutely. Pulling a single zone off, like we've done here for the second floor, for example, so that that second floor can operate on its own should needs be, that's a great backup or redundancy plan.
So Kimberly, just to review, 3 outdoor units.
Yep.
This unit is a 1-to-1, meaning
Yep.
this unit is tied to a single outdoor unit. And do you know the size on this one, Kimberly?
This one is 18,000 BTUH, so that's a
1.5 ton.
That's right.
Okay, so 18,000, and this one has a single VRF compressor outside it's tied to.
Right.
And then in my master, I've got another one similar to this. I think it's a little smaller at 15,000 BTU,
Yep.
so a ton and a quarter
Yes.
basically. And that one is tied also with my party load and my kitchen recessed one-way cassette
Yep.
into a single unit, and that's that bigger unit, the City Multi. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's a City Multi, and it's our S-Series equipment.
And what about that third piece of equipment out there? What's that one doing?
Well, you did just right. Positive Energy did just right. You wanted a little bit of space conditioning for your workshop in your garage, but it's a ductless system and it's got its own outdoor unit, so it's completely independent. You never want to be running ductwork from the house into or out of a garage. So it's from an indoor air quality and health and safety standpoint, that is a no-no.
Big no-no. And what I like about that too is, frankly, it's really simple. The guys in a couple of hours mount the Freon lines and run the electric, and then I keep going on construction, and when I'm ready to set the outdoor unit and put the whole thing together and turn it on,
Yeah.
all I do is put the head on the wall, hook up the outdoor unit, and all of a sudden I've got heating and cooling in the garage. And in my case, sometimes I'll use that as workshop space. I might also run it in the summertime to keep my garage at 80 or 82.
Sure.
To keep all my tools from rusting and all that kind of stuff. But it's
Absolutely.
going to use just a little bit of energy to do that most of the time, which I really
Right.
like.
And you kind of hinted at something that I think is important to mention, and that is, while the equipment sometimes might be more expensive than a conventional equipment, you can make up cost in terms of labor and materials if you're not running ductwork.
Huge. Now you mentioned materials. Let's close out the video. Tell me about this partnership that y'all have with Trane, and what does that mean for builders like me?
So it's good for everyone. So what we've done with our joint venture with Trane is we have really expanded our distribution reach. So Trane contractors can use their distributors that they're used to using and can get Mitsubishi Electric co-branded equipment that's Mitsubishi manufactured through their normal distribution channel. We're also offering training and certification on our systems through those same distribution hubs.
Love it. And honestly, Kimberly, I think that's a little bit of the gateway drug for me. When I made the switch to Mitsubishi a long time ago, I did, and I use mostly Mitsubishi these days, I did a house that was a 2-story house with a single zone Mitsubishi high static pressure system, and I didn't put a dehumidifier, and that was my very first Mitsubishi house. You probably remember the project.
I think I do.
And I learned a few lessons from that,
Yeah.
and one of the lessons, kind of going back to what I said really early on, was to zone or not to zone, was that you really, on a 2-story house, you almost really have to do 2 zones. You need an upstairs unit and a downstairs unit. With that stratification of the hot air arising, it's almost impossible to get good comfort on a 2-story house with a single unit.
Totally
And so
agree.
what I like about Mitsubishi is we can use smaller equipment, and when you have low load houses like I'm building, you've got all the options down to about a 1/4 ton increment, right?
Right.
And down to even, like in my kitchen, I've got a mini 1/2 ton system just
Yeah.
for my kitchen.
Right.
It all connects to 1 or maybe 2 outdoor units. And now at this not very big 2,800 square foot house, I actually have 4 zones inside plus my garage. That's 5 different thermostats. I can control it however I want, or I can turn systems off and not use them. When my kids are out of the house someday and my wife and I are just occupying the first floor, this can be
You don't
off
need
up
it.
here, and I'll just dehumidify a little bit with a dehumidifier.
That's right.
Kimberly, for people watching this and aren't currently using Mitsubishi equipment, how do they figure out how to price a job or who to talk to in their area?
Go to our website, and we have a dealer locator where you can type in your zip code and find some certified contractors near you.
And one little piece of advice from me, after having used this for a decade now, find a contractor that's done it before. You don't want to be the first install. Look for that diamond dealer from Mitsubishi who has lots of experience. This is amazing equipment, but it is a little bit more technical of an install, and especially the hookup, than a standard equipment. And when you look at this duct system, this is an incredible system that Positive Energy designed and my local contractor, Air Right, installed. They did an amazing job. It doesn't necessarily have to be this complicated. You can do all kinds of different things, from just switching out your main unit with a big high static pressure unit from Mitsubishi, or you might consider doing one of those but zoning with a mini split head or a ceiling recess cassette. There's a bunch of options. Definitely worth checking out. Huge thanks to Kimberly for being
Thanks
on
for
today.
having me.
I think we've been
great
working
to be
together
back.
for over 10
I know.
years now, Kimberly. I really appreciate you coming on
Here's
the
to
channel.
10 more.
Look, we definitely should do more. Look for a link in the description for Mitsubishi Electric's partnership with Trane. And also, I'll put a link in there for some of our old videos where we got into the weeds on manual J's and what and why and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully we'll film some more in the future, Kimberly.
Excellent. Thanks.
But if you're not currently a subscriber, guys, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content every Tuesday and every Friday. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show. Hey guys, one last tip before we go. This is where my outdoor units are going to be set. These are the Freon lines coming out. And because I'm building such an airtight house, normally we cut a pretty sizable hole and run both of these Freon lines out one hole as well as the control wire. But because I'm building such an airtight house, I really want to make sure I've got one thing per hole. So I had my HVAC company drill one hole for this pipe and one hole for this pipe. Now I can come in here with liquid flash or Prosico or tape and really air seal that nicely, rather than if I had one big hole. It's really hard to air seal that. Think about that for your future builds.